admitting failure and changing paths and how it is recruiting competitors. That is the fascinating question that has been brought up by Prince Harry's recent appearance in Canada, Vancouver area to be precise, to support and promote the Invictus Games 2025. This is probably about the most promotion that he has done for a singular event. Some of it could be due to the fact that geographically it's very close to where he is in California. But what's most fascinating is that on his own website, Sussex.com, Prince Harry describes the Invictus Games in a very peculiar way because there is zero mention of servicemen or veterans. And that is, of course, the reason why the Invictus Games were created in the first place, was to serve wounded service men and women who have come back from combat and are dealing with either physical or psychological issues. But Harry doesn't mention them at all. In fact, he has a very general perspective of it. Basically, anybody who's been injured or dealing with an illness. And so it's like the Invictus Games radically changing who can participate in the games. And then we also have the launch of the Invictus Game School program, which I'm still not exactly sure what this is supposed to be, but it's going to be launched in Canada. Everyone, your Canadian taxpayer dollars hard at work there, probably, most likely, I'm not really sure. But the aim is to promote inclusivity and resilience. However, do we want to introduce to kindergartners the realities of combat? Is there going to be an Invictus Games for kids? What the heck is going on? Because this, I'm sorry, is all over the place in terms of communication. So I think this is well worth delving into, because if Prince Harry is shifting the direction of the Invictus Games, this not only is a radical change, but can have a real impact on the future of what the Invictus Games looks like and how Harry is, I think, sort of desperate to make fetch happen. The Invictus Games has a lot of limitations, and I think Harry is pushing it far beyond what it can actually do in his desperation to have this huge global impact. When in reality, I think the whole thing will crumble under the weight of Harry's ego. So, guys, we are going to go into this. But if you haven't been to Royal News Network before, hello, my name is Brittany. I provide compelling royal commentary. So if you guys want to hit the subscribe button, I would absolutely love to have you back. And if you missed it, I was on Dan Wooten today. So I was on Dan Wooten Outspoken. If you want to catch my segment, there is a link up above here. I've also put a link to Dan's show down below. So if you guys want to check that out and give his program a follow as well, that would be absolutely fantastic. It is so fun to be on there with him. We have such great chats, and it was just like so exciting. So guys, if you want to check that out, go ahead and press the link there. All right. Again, it's sort of a lot of speculation, but just a lot of sort of interesting things when it comes to the changing up of language. And we will also go over Harry's, I think, pretty dismal interview at the Grey Cup, which is the Canadian football big game of the year, sort of like our Super Bowl here in the United States. A couple million people watch it in Canada, 50,000 people attend. And Harry, I don't even think could promote the Invictus Games well, to be quite honest, and neither could the competitor that he brought on. There is, I feel like, a clear indication of a failure of communication within the Invictus Games. And this has been a problem for a while, because overall, I think the big glaring issue with the Invictus Games is that beyond Harry and Meghan, you know nothing about it. You know vaguely it's for servicemen and women, but the miasma and the egos of Harry and Meghan are so huge that they sort of cover and limit any other information getting out about the Invictus Games. And that is a huge, massive, glaring problem. And when it comes to the competitors, I don't see a good lineup of people who are competing who can promote the games as well. I think the Invictus Games needs a very rigorous PR program or a media training program for people they believe have strong stories, are able to articulate them well. The woman they brought on for this segment, and I believe it was TSN, I don't think she could communicate very well, and I'll go into why. And Harry as well seemed to just give this elevator pitch for Invictus Games that he memorized as like, this is your games. You should be able to speak passionately on it. And I didn't feel passion. I felt kind of dry regurgitation of facts that he had to learn before this. And it just seems to be that the Invictus Games is sort of getting lost completely. And part of this is over Harry's ego. Harry, I think, is so desperate to have something that has this massive global impact that he is failing to see reality, much like so much going on in his life, which is that overall, Invictus has a shelf life. It just does. There are no big active conflicts going on right now. The United States, of course, has withdrawn from Afghanistan. So there are fewer and fewer veterans who are getting injured. So that's just not as much in the public consciousness. And to be quite honest, having been to the games myself, there are certain events that are interesting to watch and other events that, I'm sorry, are really challenging to watch as a general public person. I was trying to watch swimming. I got incredibly bored with it. It was incredibly boring. It just was. It just was. And I think Olympics when I think of swimming, but watching it, like I felt for those competitors. They did a fantastic job. It's not on them. It's just on the limitations of the appeal of this game. And Harry just does not seem to get that. And he's constantly trying to make fetch happen, which it seems to be why the language of the Invictus games, Harry shifted himself. And this was from the Sussex website. So we'll start with this, and I want to share with you the key here. Of course, Harry and Meghan's their website, I'm sorry, but it sucks. From PR perspective, it sucks. It barely gives you anything. But the big thing here is how it described the game's mission. So what is the mission of the Invictus games? Because Harry, and I say Harry because this is from his website, it says it is to inspire, empower, and bring together athletes from around the world who have experienced life-changing injuries or illnesses. Did you see the key missing feature here, which is veterans or servicemen and women? They're not here. This is basically anyone with a life-changing injury or illness. And is illness meaning like somebody who has diabetes? Because that's not really a result of combat, most likely, as the Invictus Games was originally pitched, which we can see here because the Invictus Games Foundation itself describes it as a recovery pathway for international wounded, injured, and sick servicemen and women. We collaborate to provide opportunities for post-traumatic growth, enabling those involved to reclaim their purpose, identity, and future beyond injury. Now, as you can see, those two statements don't really have that much in common with each other. They are radically different. We're going from wounded servicemen and women to basically anyone who has an illness or has an injury. Now, I actually have an injury. I broke my foot many years ago. I broke my wrist as well. So could I apply for the Invictus Games next go round and participate? I don't know because Harry, this is his games. He should be able to communicate them well, but he can't. And why is that? That's just so fascinating to me because you're waiting to see, okay, what is the thing here? And the thing is changing and it's unclear why. So let's listen to a bit of Harry's interview here. And this is about the Grey Cup, the Canadian Football League's championship game. Obviously, it's somewhat similar, I would guess, is my understanding to American football. It's basically the American football game. So it's basically their Super Bowl. And Harry joined it in this interview. And I thought, now it played a bit better the second time around. The first time around, I was like, oh my gosh, he's so terrible at this. And I will still say, Harry is actually not great at giving interviews. So you'll notice he's good with being with the public. I think he's a terrible interview, to be quite honest. I wonder, especially if he does these interview programs with other people, how many takes they have to go through, how many times they have to ask him different questions to get the best response, because he really is not great, I don't think, at giving a good response. And it honestly sounded like, to me, like he knew nothing about the Grey Cup. And I'm like, so if you're there to promote the Invictus Games and get people to share your passion for the Invictus Games, you could try to show with smidge of passion for the games there that they are the number one games in Canada. And I will say as well, this again is a lot more promotion than Harry has ever done for any other game, which screams to me is that this is getting to be a tougher and tougher sell every single time. So he has to go again and again and again to try to get people to buy tickets to these games. And I will say, having been to the games myself, they were kind of fun and then they could be kind of dull. It's just true. So let's watch a little bit of this here.
Sussex and the patron of the Invictus Games, which are coming to Vancouver.
And Harry could try to look a little bit smilier and less like he wanted to kill the interviewer guy. He did this anytime it wasn't like specifically on him, he could do a much better job participating in this interview. Just saying.
And Whistler in February, and alongside Wendy, who is competing for Canada at those games. First of all, is both your first Grey Cup experiences, and what are you looking forward to most?
First Grey Cup, yeah. What we're looking forward to, the game getting started.
Such a lame response. It's like, I feel like he's just saying, I just want the game to get started because he has nothing else to say about the game. Now, again, granted, he is not Canadian. I get it. But you should be able to say just a little bit more than, I can't wait to get the game started. It's like, do you care at all about the game? I don't know.
Let's go.
Hey, we went on for 5 hours. Tell me about it. Is this your first win as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Regina. It's my...
Okay, so she says, I think Regina, but it comes out sounding like vagina. So number one, she's kind of all over the place. She's not a great interview. And if you're going to have people promoting the games who are competitors, you need to have the best people do it. And I'm sorry, she does not come across well. And that's not necessarily her fault because she should have people help her do that. But I'm just saying, I've had media training a couple of times. I just feel like she just doesn't come across well. And granted, you could watch my interview with Dan Wooten and see I don't do well all the time either. And that is true. But I am somebody who's learning. But I feel like this is a little bit weird, especially I think she's saying Regina, but it sounds like vagina. So let's listen to a little bit of this again.
Well,
yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Regina. It's my first. So yeah, absolutely.
And then she does, it's my first. So literally, I feel the double entendre, and I'm like, that is not appropriate for broadcasting because she's saying, I think, Regina or something. And then she goes, it's my first time. And she's like, she's laughing at her own joke. But this is not appropriate for the venue. You shouldn't joke about that. Like, you almost, like, am I crazy? Do y'all feel as well that she's in on this double entendre that makes zero sense in the context of this interview? If you're on Ask Her Daddy or something, whatever, Call Her Daddy, whatever that podcast is, sure, make that joke. But this is a nationally televised, like, pregame thing. You need to think better about your language. And again, this goes back to the Invictus Games cannot choose good spokespeople. She needed to be better trained. She needed to figure out this is a softball interview. And granted, she's nervous. I get it. But like, it literally sounds like she's pulling out double entendres. So let's keep going.
Rooting for today? No rooting interest?
I got my favorite. I'm going to keep it to me.
For those,
she's terrible, guys. Oh my gosh, you can almost see. Sorry, you can't totally see it
who don't know,
but you almost feel Harry cringing. She's terrible. I'm sorry, she's terrible. She's like, okay, I'm not trying to make fun of her, but I'm just saying that's not really a great look. And if you have somebody who's going to pull those kind of things, you should know that before you shove them up there with a microphone. And she's like, can't say why can't she say who she's supporting? I find that just to be really odd. Like, just say who you're rooting for. It makes the interview more interesting. This is not coming across well because it looks like she doesn't care either. So you have these two people who are promoting the Invictus Games. And also, I mean, I get it, the camera angle. I wish they were kind of better centered instead of way up here at the top. But like, they're here at the games and you get the sense they don't care one iota about this, but they're telling people to pay money to attend their games. When they're at a game, you can tell neither one of them care about. Just a little bit of research, a preparing of questions would have done so much better here. But like, okay, we got to watch this again because it's kind of crazy.
I got my favorite. I'm going to keep it to me.
For those who don't know what Invictus is, tell us what it is and what it means to you.
So again, Harry kind of looks grim in between shots. And oh man, I hate how it stands here because I'm trying to watch the time too. So let's though keep going and hear how Harry describes the Invictus Games. And I want you to pay close attention to what he's saying because it's very sort of dry and not really anything that would get anybody to attend these games. So let's listen.
Okay, what it is, well, it's our 10-year anniversary this year, which is pretty exciting. The Invictus movement started back in 2014.
So he needs to stop talking about it as the Invictus movement. It's not a movement, Harry. It's a game. It's not a movement. There's nothing called the Olympic movement. That's just sort of dumb. Again, you get such the sense that he's trying to make fetch happen. He's trying to turn the games into something they are not. The Earthshot can be a movement because it's simply something where we're trying to create solutions to environmental problems. So you can, I think, classify that and characterize it as a potential movement because you inspire more people. And yes, not everybody can attend, not everybody can participate, but you're inspiring people to move in different ways. This is nothing. I just don't get it at all. I just don't get it. And he needs to just stop believing his own delusions about this and be realistic about what the games are. They are a game for competitors that have a very, I'm sorry to say this, but I believe it is true, a limited public interest. Has a limited public interest, let's be honest. And him promoting it constantly and making it so self-centered, I don't think is helping because it becomes the hairy games. It is the hairy games. And you don't get the competitors out there actually making the games relevant because who's going to sell the games? It's the competitors, not him. He can't sell the games. Yes, he is necessary to give it a broader platform, but he can't sell the games because it becomes the hairy games and he thinks of it as the hairy games. I feel like every year it gets further and further from the palace. Harry more and more is concocting his identity within the games. And it's not healthy for him, it's not healthy for the games, and it belies the reality that this has a limited appeal. It does. And he needs to stick to it small. You're getting the sense he wants it to be as big as the Grey Cup. It's just not. It's just not. It's delusional to think otherwise. Like kind of crazy. He needs to get a grip on reality and he's not there. He's just simply not there.
It's a sporting platform used for the rehabilitation and support for wounded soldiers, both serving and veterans.
So why didn't you put that on your website, Harry? If it's for veterans and wounded service members, why wasn't that on your website? You're changing your language, and yet you're not. So which is it? You got to be clear here. This again goes back to why their PR is terrible.
And we've now got 25 nations growing all the time. And it's really an opportunity for the individuals themselves and their families to heal and rehabilitate through sport.
So that's sort of an elevator pitch for it. But did you feel any passion from it? Did any of that make you actually want to attend the games? Not really. Not really. I don't want to attend the games for that. I'm like, okay. I mean, that's great. But it also sounds like it's way too much for the competitors and their families. But then you also want other members of the public to pay to attend. So which is it? You have to make it appealable to the mass market, and it's just not. But Harry thinks it is. It's just not, Harry. It's just not. And he needs to be aware of that because the Invictus Games is going to hit a wall at some point. At some point, somebody's going to go, we're not paying for this. And what is he going to do? He can't fund it. The Invictus Games Foundation can't fund it. They needed $30 million from Canada to put this thing on. How much are they going to need from Birmingham next year or in 2027 to put this on? No idea. But can they facilitate it for much longer? I mean, I have serious doubts. I do have serious doubts. I think it's cannibalizing itself. It's just too much. He tried too hard. It's just moving well beyond the parameters of what it was in the first place. And he's promoting it, I think, so much in part because they can't sell it. You have to promote it this hard sometimes because you can't sell it. He did a little bit of that in 2016, but I don't remember much in 2017 in Toronto or the 2018 in Australia and New Zealand and stuff. So I feel like all of a sudden we're getting a lot more Harry promotion. And I think it's because he's having a harder and harder time selling this.
When you were a medical officer and mechanic in the Navy, suffered PTSD after 15 years, what has Invictus meant to you as an athlete?
So that's really important, is to focus on the athletes. I would 100% say that. But again, you'll see here, I don't think she's the best representative. So let's listen.
Well, as you know, PTSD is a illness that destroys connections, that interrupts some of your closest relationships in life. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, I think it really affected the relationship with myself.
So I found this really interesting that it affects relationships, PTSD with other people, and then affects your relationship with yourself, which I totally understand. But when she goes on a bit here, at least what I remember, so excuse me if I'm wrong, is that she made this it all about her. And I get that. But I think the selling aspect of it is not that, oh, I get to feel excited and happy about me. Isn't that great? It comes across as a little selfish or a little self centered. And I think it would have been better to say, this helped me reconnect with my family, with my friends, and made me stronger as a person. I think there's a way to word this where it doesn't come across so as this is all about me. Because when you think about this, Canada paid overall $30 million, put $30 million into the Invictus Games, 15 from the overall Canadian government and 15 from British Columbia. So each competitor, because there's about 500, which is not that much, the games have stagnated pretty much in terms of growth of competitors since 2016. They gave us an exact number and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but since then we're getting vaguer and vaguer numbers on how many people is like around a 500. Well, that could be like 501 or 510, or it could be 462, because technically if you round up, you get 500. So we don't know how many, but if you think about it, Canada is paying essentially about $60,000 per competitor to participate in these games. And she's essentially saying that you're paying these taxpayer dollars if you're Canadian, and these games are all about me. It's all about me and my success and my experiences and all that. And I just don't think that's the best angle, to be quite honest. I don't think that's the best angle, because I'm thinking if I'm a Canadian citizen going, so I'm paying $60,000 for you to feel good about yourself. I don't know if I feel comfortable or if that was the best use of my taxpayer dollars. So let's go on.
So the Invictus creates this safe bubble, maybe a safe incubator, right? For all of us to relearn some of these connections, to reform these new boundaries, and then ultimately to show up for each other so that we can restart the repair and recovery of ourselves.
So again, part of it is that recovering yourselves. But are they pushing too much as like, well, it's all about me and my recovery? And again, that's a part of it. I get that. And maybe I'm not describing it well. But if you're pitching this to the broad public, you're saying, come here so I can celebrate me. I think there's a better way to phrase that makes it more encompassing of the people and encourages others to attend. Because right now you're being encouraged to go basically because it's like, well, I feel better about me. So you should come so I feel better about me. So is that it? That's not very good. Like they really should have chosen somebody better, in my opinion, or trained her better. And a way to phrase that where it comes across as we are a community. We help lift each other up. We help succeed. I think we is somewhat better than I here. That's just my personal opinion, though.
Amazing. Now, one of the events you're competing in is rugby. You're in multiple sports. I know Harry played a lot of rugby, so you know your skill set better than anyone, okay? If you had to translate rugby to the CFL, would you make a better quarterback, receiver, running back, maybe a middle linebacker? What would you be?
So he knows nothing. Harry knows nothing about football. He's probably learned a little bit about American football being in the United States, but I felt his answer here was pretty weak. And it's a weird question, I have to admit.
This is wheelchair rugby, and it's conveniently called murder ball. So when it comes to positions, I wouldn't be able to tell you which position is better.
No, but you.
Okay, so he's flipping it over to wheelchair rugby. And it's like he's talking about American football. And I get it. You're promoting the Invictus Games and it is wheelchair rugby, but he's not asking you about wheelchair rugby. He's asking you about how you would translate your previous experience as a rugby player when you played rugby to the Canadian Football League, essentially kind of the National American Football League. So how Harry could have answered this question, I think, a bit better is that he could have said, well, I'm not sure exactly which position I would take, but at the Invictus Games, we play something called wheelchair rugby, which they've conveniently labeled murder ball. And so you could kind of spin it that way. But I feel like he just jumps right into wheelchair rugby. It's called murder ball. And it's like, what? He doesn't bridge the questions well, in my opinion. There is a way to bridge the questions. If you watch a lot of interviews, especially on newscasts and stuff, you can tell the really good interviewers, like for me on Dad Win, I'm okay. But there is a way to sort of bridge and kind of connect with a different thought that you had. So it's sort of a way to answer the question that you're being asked and translating it into a response to whatever you're trying to promote. There is a way to do that. But again, I would argue that Harry is not doing that well.
You were rugby when you played your rugby.
So that's why he has to ask the question again. Because Harry, you're not at the Invictus games, you're at the Canadian National Football League or whatever it's called. So he is asking you a question about American football. And you all of a sudden go, wheelchair rugby. I played wheelchair rugby at the Invictus game. I mean, he doesn't even say the Invictus games. Like he can't bridge the thoughts well. And so the guy kind of has to go back to, and again, I would put some of this on the interviewer as well, going, I asked you about how your experience in actual rugby would compare to this game. And because I was really confused at first too, because again, Harry mumbles his questions and stuff. He doesn't enunciate very well. So let's listen to his response.
I played rugby. I was fly half and scrum half.
Well,
so he kind of explains what his position is. Harry has no idea what American football is. And so he picks the most obvious answer.
All that time ago.
So if you translated it to Canadian football, what do you think you'd be? What was your best
I don't
skill?
know. I think quarterback is a cool place to be.
So he picks the most obvious answer, which shows me he knows nothing about the game. I wouldn't be surprised if Harry's not even sure if this is just like American football, a different kind of football. I'm sure he's not sure, which is why he can't stinking answer the question. So he hears quarterback, and obviously quarterback in American football is sort of the central role of the team. But there's also running backs, halfbacks, cornerbacks, like corner, not quarter, corner, and different defenders, different roles, and those sorts of things. And so he's been to the Super Bowl, but I really get the sense the guy has not spent much time around an American football game, because he should be able to answer this question. But I think he's genuinely probably confused about whether or not this is like American football. And he should have been better prepped for this. This again goes back to something I've mentioned a lot about Harry and Meghan, is that their PR is terrible and he can't give these decent interviews, in my opinion. This was the same as the GMA. The GMA interview was bad. Just ostensibly, it was bad. He could not answer questions well. Same thing here. Same thing here. Really easy question. What position would you play if you were, you've played rugby, and if you've been in America now, you probably should know a little bit about football. So how do you think, what position would you play there? Not a great question either, but Harry obviously had no idea.
Quarterback, all right, running the show, exactly. And winter sports for the first time in Invictus. Whistler, who did such a great job of the 2010 Olympics, and you're doing with skeleton and biathlon.
Right.
So he's switching to different things because he knows I think the interviewer guy is kind of realizing these two are pretty useless when it comes to most other questions.
You looking forward to those?
Absolutely. Thrilling. Absolutely thrilling.
Listen.
It would be better if she could have a bit of a better response there. This was not great interview prep for either of them.
Thank you so much for coming. I guess as a role of Prince, you're not.
So Harry is looking really dour here. He could look a little bit more engaged.
Allowed to be partisan. Can you make a prediction for today's game, or no? Do you have to stay neutral?
So the dumb thing is, you're a Prince, you have to stay partisan, which is stupid because he's not really a working royal anymore, so who cares?
Not going to make a prediction for today,
but
this time, in less than 3 months, we'll be back here for the opening ceremony in February. So that's what we're really excited about. But
an opening ceremony for what? He needs to say the Invictus Games. It's going to be powerful. It's like he's just saying, well, we'll be back here in a couple months for the Invictus Games. Isn't that exciting? He's and to be a good ambassador for your organization, you need to elicit a level of passion in how you're talking about it. He can't do that here. I don't know if he was distracted by all the stuff going on. I don't know what it was, but he cannot convey passion for the games. He's very vague. He's very like, well, come back here. We'll do the games. It's like, it's not right here. And there, you don't even have football. So like, how in the world Ashley Hansen, when she like bragged that somehow working with Harry and Meghan, everybody was like begging for her to work for them. And I'm like, really? After watching this? Again, yeah, I have a strong feeling I could give this to any PR professional and they would cringe.
Can't wait for it. Both your first Grey Cups. Enjoy them both today. And thank you so much for dropping by.
Thank you very much, Shane.
So he was like, I think, thrilled to be done with this because they were terrible. They were both terrible for different reasons. I don't understand why they put these people out there and don't prep them. Let me see if there's anything other interesting here.
Prince Harry, and when you're going to see her competing in 4 different.
You almost feel like Harry feels like he kind of flubbed that. And he did, bud. He kind of did. So let's move on to something else, because now apparently Invictus Games is going to be indoctrinating the kiddos. Now, that might be a little bit of a stretch, but not that much, because Invictus Games is starting to get into strange territory here. And I'm like, what is going on? So, if you are in Canada, exciting thing. Invictus Games school program launched with Prince Harry in Vancouver. This is from a website, because I thought I had a little bit of a better information. Miss 604, which I would imagine is an area code in Vancouver. That would be my guess. And I haven't found anything on the Invictus website about what this is actually supposed to be. It's strange. I find it really odd. So it says this morning in Vancouver, Prince Harry introduced the Invictus Games school program with the help of local children and youth as part of a lead up to the Invictus Games. This initiative, the first of its kind for the games, aims to help teachers and students around the world engage with the spirit of the event by sparking meaningful dialogue around the themes of inclusivity and resilience. So, are we going to be explaining how people got injured in combat to grade school children? Is that necessary? I mean, that's the reality of the situation, but you could traumatize some kids if you're not careful. And why do you need to involve kids in this? Like, are we indoctrinating the kids to love the Invictus Games because you can't get other normal adults to love the games in the same way? This is just cringe to me. So it says the school's program classroom resources. Let's see if we get anything interesting if I click on the link. Include things teachers can do in school and also community connection opportunities for the students. Resources are free to download for students and teachers all over the world and available in French and English. The 1 to 5 day lesson plans aim to inspire students and spark meaningful dialogue around the themes of inclusivity and resilience. Okay, so we have Harry with the kids. So they went to a Shaughnessy Elementary School where they participated in a coloring activity. He also played sitting volleyball in a rousing scrimmage. So there was also a station where service members of the Canadian Armed Forces who facilitated discussions on the topics of PTSD, mental health, and journey of recovery. Why? Why? This is so unnecessary and it's weird. It's weird. I don't understand. So the mini unit or standalone activities, and Harry wants this to go all over the world, guys. That's the thing. Harry wants this to go all over the world. So everyone can be as obsessed with the Invictus Games as he is. So here we go. Here's the watch Heart of Invictus. Oh my gosh. Okay, number 1, Heart of Invictus is not for children. The scene with the woman from Ukraine, I believe she takes her shirt off in one, like they're testing, I think, for her EKG or whatever. And I think she definitely takes her shirt off. I can't remember how much you see because I think she has been injured as well. And so that's not for them. So they're releasing a video of Invictus Games competitor alumni each week until the games in February. Like, why? I don't understand. What in the world? Like over 500 heroes, barely increase from what they had in 2016 when they had 470 something. So they've gained maybe at the most, let's say 50 people. And that's not that much. This thing is struggling to grow. And so we need to teach kids about this. I'm sorry, but this just screams of indoctrination to try to get a willing and participating audience because you can't get one yourself. So you're targeting kids. So, golly, we got elementary school. I am unconquered package. Wow. So we're telling the kids, this is just. Okay, why do you have to introduce the Invictus Games to children? Why are you doing that? That's just weird. It should be a parent's choice whether or not to expose their kids to the Invictus Games. And I hate to say it, but yeah, the stories are compelling, But at the same time, I think they're more for adults, not to mention the fact that this is nothing compared to the Olympics. When you're talking about, like, real big, you know, physical competitions, it's the Olympics. It's wrestling. It's football. It's watching people at their peak. It's harder to watch people when they're not. It just is. Yes, you have that personal connection. If you do to that person, then you feel the triumph as they succeed. But I don't think that translates to children. This literally is coming across as Harry's personal vanity project getting shoved into schools for literally no reason. Oh, so you can participate, post the students' activities, post the students' work. Make sure you get the parents' approval for that. Introduction of the Invictus Games. They're they're literally trying to get kids interested so they can actually get people to watch this thing. That's so disturbing to me. That's so kind of disturbing to me. Brainstorm and share. I am. Oh my gosh, this is so weird. This is so weird. Oh my gosh. Like a word fill-in activity for this. Is this crazy? The Invictus Games Vancouver 2025 are coming next blank, bringing over 500 competitors up to 25 nations. The games are for people blank who are wounded in secure service. Some of the men and women competing are still serving in the military, and some are blank. Oh gosh, this is so weird. Look, they're trying to get kids to memorize what the competitions are going to be. This is weird. This is so stinking weird. They don't even do this for the stinking Olympics. You know why they don't need to do it? Because people want to watch the Olympic Games. I'm sorry, but they don't want to watch this. And you're not going to get that by forcing kids to go through activities that they don't really understand, for games they don't really understand, and for something they'll watch and probably be a little disappointed by. This is insane to me. This is absolute insanity. This is absolute insanity. Kindergarten through second grade. They're asking people from the military, like seriously. Wow. Trivia challenge. Oh my gosh, this is so freaking weird. This is weird. I'm sorry, this is weird. And to be fair, guys, I think this could actually work in a weird way to expose children to our veterans and everything. I think is a good thing. But here's the issue I have is that this is not something that is general. I would not have an issue if the Invictus Games, and Harry has said he wants this in every freaking school in the world, by the way. I would have no issue with this if all these activities were just generally about veterans. But that's not what this is. It's all about promoting Invictus. So it only really matters for the 500 or so competitors that the Invictus Games can attract. The rest of the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of veterans out there who frankly just don't find the Invictus Games that helpful or just don't find it to be something that they want to engage in, it makes it seem like they don't matter because all that matters when it comes to veterans is Invictus. And Harry has had this savior complex about the Invictus Games for quite a while. And frankly, I find it very, very disturbing. Harry just seems to think that the Invictus Games is the answer to every single veteran's question and experience, and it's just not. It works for some people, and it should stick to that. But Harry, I think, has this fantasy that every single veteran in the world just wants to be part of Invictus, and that's just simply not true. It doesn't work for everyone, and that is perfectly fine. But to have this notion or idea that he wants to put these worksheets in every single school in the world to promote his individual event is insanity. That anybody might even just humor this is ridiculous. They need to scrap this entirely, in my personal opinion. Scrap this. This is not helpful to anyone. And the reason is that it is solely focused on boosting Harry's ego with Invictus. It's not actually dedicated to helping veterans. I mean, they want people to watch Heart of Invictus so that they can boost their dismal numbers. They want people to know what competitions are at the Vancouver games so that they can go to the games. This is not to help veterans. This is to help promote the Invictus Games solely. And that is absolutely disturbing, in my opinion, that they are utilizing children in order to do this. Should not be happening. This should have been kicked to the curb immediately. If they cannot create a curriculum that is just solely neutral, just talking about veterans' experiences overall, then they should not be in this business. Why should any taxpayer dollars, teachers' time at all be expended to promote the Invictus Games? If Harry can't support his games on his own, then it's not working. This to me is a symbol that the Invictus Games are not working in their current model. It's not working. They can't get butts in seats. And this is just a reflection of that. This is very weird. What are the high schoolers doing? So they have to watch the Heart of Invictus trailer. Oh, so you couldn't get people to watch Heart of Invictus, so now you're forcing people to watch it. Or watch the trailer at least. It wasn't a good documentary. It wasn't good. I got bored. It was bloated. It didn't flow well. There wasn't a central story. It meandered all over the place. My gosh. Why are you forcing educators to make up for your own failures? This is weird. This is really weird. This is unbelievably weird. Golly, you have to watch Heart of Invictus. I'm sorry it failed, Harry, but that's on you. That's on you. It wasn't good. Oh gosh. Find meaning in different things. My gosh, why are you indoctrinating children? Read pages 5 through 8 from PDF called Traumatic Brain Injury and Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. So they want kids to read this and then write an essay about it. I mean, are they hoping for the next generation of Invictus kids? Those who were sent off to war and injured and come back. And look, you participated in Invictus Games educational exercise. So you should be well prepared and wanting to engage in the Invictus Games. This is crazy town stuff. I'm sorry. This is crazy town stuff. Watch this video. Invictus Games gives military men and women hope, inspiration. Like, if you're having to shove this down people's throats, it must not be working. This is crazy town stuff. This is crazy town stuff. Oh man, that one opened in a different window. Gosh darn it. So you missed part of that. So let's see. Adaptive sitting volleyball. To be a simulation, not a replication of private insights. This is just so weird, guys. This is just so weird. Oh gosh, this is like indoctrinating kids. What the heck? If kids want to learn more about this should be their choice or their parents' choice. This should not be shoved into them by the Invictus Games. Create your team biography. Oh gosh, this is just, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. Oh gosh. Does anyone in your class have a connection to the military they would like to share? Why is this? I just don't get this. This is just it's disturbing to me. I'm very disturbed, guys. I'm very disturbed. You should not need kids to promote your games. And looking back through this again as well, what I also noticed is that what is the educational benefit to this? There is none, because it's all focused around a singular event, which is the Invictus Games and promoting the Invictus Games. There's no other rhyme or reason to this. There is no educational benefit to this. And it's not something that I feel like gives kids a broader view of the world in some ways, because they won't really be interested in this, number one. But number two, this is not for them. And I will say I was a high schooler who was very interested in history, especially World War II. That was a little odd, I know for sure. But that was like something that I was personally very passionate about, which is why I was into it. And I read some books that other kids my age probably wouldn't read because of the material, the heaviness of the subject matter. But It wasn't something that people were totally shoving down our throats, and it was something actually we needed to learn. I'm sorry, but this is not something kids need to learn. Kids do not need to learn about the Invictus Games. Yes, it's good to learn about the experience and the difficulties of coming back after combat, but that's not what this is. This is solely to promote the Invictus Games, no other reason. There is even no educational benefit to this, I would argue, except to promote the Invictus Games. And that means this is entirely a sham, in my opinion. This is totally a sham. If you're like going for kids, you're going for an audience that you could say is not savvy and just maybe is going to do whatever you need them to do because you need someone to promote them because you can't promote them yourself. Like, overall, what I would say this screams to me is that the Invictus Games is starting to fail. Starting to fail to such an extent, they're like, let's grab the kids. Let's grab the kids and see if we can get them to pay attention. Harry, go up to Vancouver as much as humanly possible to say Invictus Games, Invictus Games, Invictus Games, Invictus Games. And hopefully if you say it 3 times, we'll get a massive audience. And it's just not going to work. I just don't think it's going to work because the Invictus Games has a shelf life. It's moving beyond what it could. Harry stopped letting it grow organically and is forcing it to grow. And I just don't think the audience is there. I don't think the audience is there. And Harry is going to shove this thing into failure to satisfy his own ego rather than having it grow just naturally. If it could grow naturally, it would be so much more successful than what Prince Harry is trying to do right now. Prince Harry will ruin the Invictus Games by doing this. It will crumble at some point. It will collapse under the weight of Prince Harry's ego because the Invictus Games can only grow, in my opinion, if left on its own and naturally growing among the service members. This kind of shoving and forcing it to grow, maybe even expanding it to other groups of people to try and get more competitors is just a sign of something that's not working. It's not working. And you shouldn't have to indoctrinate people. You shouldn't have to expand it in the way Harry is in order to make it work. It's just something that I think a couple of them was probably good. And then the rest should have been lower level, smaller country by country competitions. And maybe once demand was met, maybe they had a big competition. Having it every 2 years on a different continent is just insane because you think you have to bring in all these competitors, all these coaches, the families, medical carers in some instances, those sorts of things. You have to bring all those people in. Whereas in Earthshot, yes, it changes continents every year, but this is a very small team. You need an auditorium. You need some people to present and be there as participants in the awards, but it doesn't need a massive facility to undertake it. Multiple buildings in order to house and show off the competitors. The Olympics themselves struggle to maintain. Paralympics, the same thing. The Olympics are wildly expensive to put on, and usually they don't make any money for the city doing it. Oftentimes, the city goes into bankruptcy. So the Invictus Games is trying to do the same thing on a shorter time scale and something that just does not have broad appeal. This is absolute insanity. It's got to end at some point. Otherwise, most likely, this thing is just going to completely and utterly explode or self-destruct in Harry's face. That is the future, unfortunately, for the Invictus Games. I hope for the competitors themselves, they get something out of it. I think the idea of the Invictus Games is great. But if you need to indoctrinate children to grow your games, you got a big problem. So guys, let me know what you think of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you very soon. Bye.